Framework of writing an argumentative paper or critical review. It is important to remember at the undergraduate level and maybe even the master's level you are not expected to research new ideas or formulate new data. You are most likely using previous research conducted by other researchers to make an analysis on your argument. Using the information from other research, you have to state your point, position, and argument, then clearly and concisely reinforce that point, position, and argument with the research data you have found. Introduction. In this section you want to state the goal of the paper and have a strong thesis statement. Be clear and concise, tell the reader exactly what you are going to do in this paper and how you are going to reinforce your stance and argument. This includes a brief explanation of how you plan to support your argument and thesis statement with existing research. Literature review. This section has no analysis towards your research problem, rather it describes each literature you are going to use and how that literature is going to support your argument. Therefore, the analysis is done beforehand when you are first reading the article. In the literature review, it is important to describe every piece of literature you are going to use by highlighting the goal, thesis, and supporting arguments of that piece of literature. After doing that, describe how the literature is relevant to your paper and reinforces your thesis. Methodology. In most cases, when you are writing an argumentative paper or a critical review, your paper will use secondary research. Secondary documentary analysis is a systematic way for reviewing and evaluating documents, drawing upon multiple sources of evidence for corroboration. By using different sources, it aims to corroborate findings across the data, creating a triangulation of information, and minimizing the chances of bias. Moreover, document analysis provides intensive studies on a specific single phenomenon, producing vital information about the study. Therefore, the rationale for document analysis is to ensure data triangulation from multiple sources and different research methods for a rich description and understanding of the phenomenon. For bonus points, or if it is required, you can talk about the dependent and independent variable, unit of analysis, and explain some concepts in this section as well. Discussion. This is the analysis part of your paper where you share your findings from your literature review in relation to your research problem. The findings from the literature review is to reinforce your thesis using the analysis you have done with the evidence from other articles. The findings are your supporting arguments to the point you are trying to make. List out your findings in your first paragraph and tell the reader how the arguments from literature are reinforcing your thesis. In the following paragraphs, examine each finding in depth and always bring it back to how it reinforces your thesis and corroborate your argument. Conclusion. In this section you want to be clear and concise on what you want your reader to take away after reading the article. You also want to restate your thesis and how with the evidence you found and the analysis conducted, that it supports your argument or stance. You are going to realize that throughout the video I have been repeatedly saying that we are bringing it back to the thesis or reinforcing the thesis. This is because that is the whole point of academic writing. It is clear and concise on what you want to accomplish and how you are going to accomplish it. Everything is used to back up the argument you are trying to make. Using an example from a writing I did when I was in school is the framework put into action. Don't worry too much about the content of the paper but look at the structure. This is a good takeaway so you can implement it in your own papers. If I am moving too quickly, don't worry, there is a copy of the paper attached and you can stop and pause the video to read the paper. In the introduction section, my first 2 sentences are the goal of my paper. My thesis is 2 sentences right here. The rest of my introduction is letting the reader know how I will support my argument and reinforce my thesis. In the literature review section, I describe the articles I am going to use. There is no analysis in this section, instead the analysis is on the literature I read beforehand. As you can see here, I will describe the source I am using. I identify what the literature examines, the goal of the literature, the argument of the article, and how the author supports their argument. In the next paragraph I bring it back to my research problem and it reinforces my argument in my paper. In the methodology section I describe the type of research I am using for my paper. I very briefly go over why I am using this research. In hindsight, I would expand this further and go into more detail. Then I go into what the variables are for the paper and I describe the unit of analysis. These two factors tell the readers about how you analyzed your topic in the next section. Lastly, I describe some concepts that are important to understand in the research. By understanding certain terms and concepts, it provides the reader a fulsome understanding of what is being analyzed in the article. As you can see, after describing these concepts in the final sentence, I always bring it back to my thesis and main argument to reinforce it for the reader. In the discussion section, this is where the analysis is shown. In this section, I explain how evidence from the literature review corroborates with my thesis. Here I introduce my findings in the first paragraph, listing it in the order that I will go in depth explaining in the following paragraphs in this section, and then quickly bringing it back to how all the findings from literature reinforces my thesis. In the following paragraphs, going in the order of my findings, I go into detail of what I have found from the literature and explain my analysis of different factors relating to the problem to explain how it supports my thesis. Essentially, each of these individual findings are my supporting arguments to back up my thesis. In the last paragraph, I quote-unquote wrap up everything up from my findings and analysis and clearly explain how everything reinforces my argument. In the conclusion section, I summarize the points I have made throughout the paper and most importantly, I repeat my goal, thesis, and arguments in the paper. As you can see here, I rephrased the problem that was mentioned earlier in the paper and discussed the findings that I have analyzed from the previous research in relation to my research problem. Then, once again, I go back to my thesis to say how everything that we have seen in this paper reinforces my main argument. An important note, this is the conclusion, there should be no new information, everything should be a repeat or rephrased from what was mentioned in previous sections. Thank you for tuning in, and if you found this video informative, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.